Let me tell you a little bit about myself really quick, and then I'll talk to you. I was born in Youngstown. A lot of people think because the way I dress that there's some dress code I'm violating, but I dress the way I like to dress. It elicits a lot of questions about where I'm from for some reason. But I am from the city of Youngstown. I was born on the North Side Hospital, raised on the South Side on Laclede. My mother took me and my two brothers to Birmingham, Alabama for a little bit to be raised there. My oldest brother remained here, went to St. Dom's, graduated from Mooney. Unfortunately, my brother was murdered in '95, and that's what brought me and my other brothers and my mother back from Alabama. And so I've been here since 1995. Went to Wilson for a little bit and then graduated from Cheney. You guys at Valley Christian are going to get me in trouble with the rest of the schools because I've been here quite a number of times already, and I think I'm coming back again. But I share that with you to say you can have all the plans you want, right? And this morning, when I talk to you about some of the things that have happened in my life, I just wanted to share one scripture with you really quick so that you understand where I'm going with what I'm talking about. And it's Proverbs 19:21. It says this. It says that many are the plans in a man's heart, but the purpose of the Lord will prevail. Let me break that down for you. You could be thinking about all the stuff you want to think about for your life. You could be coming up with all the ideas that you can muster up in your brain. And what you should acknowledge is that through all of that, it's God's plans that will prevail.
Amen.
So actually, if you spend some time thinking about that, then you'll reach a place like I've reached where you just, there's a dude who knew martial arts, if you ever heard of him, Bruce Lee. He said, be like water. What is water? What is his point? Water adapts. You put water in a cup and it becomes the shape of that cup. You put water in a river, it takes the shape of that river, but it flows all through the obstacles that it encounters. Water will flow through rock. Water will flow through grass when it rains. It means be flexible. Allow God the opportunity to tell you what his plans are for your life instead of you coming up with all of them. Doesn't that sound like a much easier life than to try and figure it all out on your own? Now, I know you believe that the plans that you have for yourself are good. There's a scripture, for I know the plans that I have for you. But that's not you talking. If you're telling yourself that, I know the plans that I have for me, you're missing the fact that that's God talking to you. He says, I know the plans that I have for you. And what you have to give yourself over to, what you have to become like water for, is because the more you fight, the more off you get. The more you forget that your plans will never, ever equate to the plans that the person who created you has for you. I mean, raise your hand if you can come up with better plans than the person who had the blueprints for your whole life. And the reason I say that is because I had plans. I had plans when I was a kid. I used to sit in front of the TV and I was a visual artist. I used to draw all of the time. I had plans. I had plans to go on and be some famous artist, or once computers came out and graphic design happened, I thought I would go on and do billboards and advertisements and websites, and I had plans. And then, when I was 14 years old, when my brother was murdered in the city of Youngstown, everything changed. my plans became my mother's, because a mother grabbed her other 3 sons and tried to protect them. But the oddest thing happened. My mother moved us from Birmingham, Alabama, back to the city that claimed my brother's life. What kind of plans? Does that sound like it makes sense? It was the oddest thing in the world. I say that because that day when we returned to Birmingham or Youngstown is the first time I met my father. I never met him in my life, and I met him in the funeral car. I know I'm speaking a little heavier to you this morning, but imagine 14 years old, lost your brother, moving back to the city that you were birthed in, meeting your father for the first time on the way to a funeral. So at the funeral, I made more plans for my life. The plans that I made were, I don't want to participate in any of this. I don't want to participate in family. I don't want to participate in friendship. I don't want to participate in anything that would cause me to lose my life. I won't participate in debates over who the hottest rapper is. I don't participate on who's better at basketball or football. I didn't participate in sports. I didn't participate in dating. I didn't want to argue with no dudes over no chicks, over none of that. I just didn't participate. For 10 years, from 14 till 24, I stopped participating. At 21, I got married, had my first child, tried to go to college. This was my attempt at trying to participate in life. But 10 years later, at 34, I find myself getting a divorce and realizing that I didn't know myself, I didn't know my own family, I didn't know my own children, and I didn't know my own self. These were not my plans. I literally sat in the parking lot of my job that day and I said, this is not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be 34 years old going through a divorce. I'm not supposed to be working a job that is taking everything from me and not giving much back except a paycheck. I'm not supposed to be getting a divorce. I'm supposed to be, if you remember, an artist. That's what I thought. Those were the plans. And I had a moment in my car at work, sitting in the parking lot before I went into my job that day, and I'm having a conversation with God, and I said, what is going on? This is not where I thought I would be. And as I had that conversation, I had to admit that all of those years, the 10 years after my brother was murdered, from 14 to 24, I had to admit that I was afraid. I was afraid of losing my life in the city that took my brother's life. And I had to admit that I didn't know that city. I didn't know it well. And so I made a commitment. I said, I have to get to know myself. I have to get to know my children. I have to get to know my city. And once I realized that I was afraid for 10 years of my life to come out of a shell, I committed right there in my car. I said, I'm not going to let Youngstown take my life. But if you grew up in the streets like I grew up, you would find that when you make statements, you better be able to back them up. You don't open your mouth, you don't run it to say something that you can't back up. And so I'm calling myself to the carpet saying, how will I ensure that the city of Youngstown never claims my life in the same way that it's taken my brother's life? And if you sit a moment and you allow God to share his plans with you, I promise you he'll answer. If you've never had God answer one of your questions, just sit a moment, because it didn't take long. When I said, how will I ensure that Youngstown doesn't take my life? The answer came pretty quickly. God said to me, the only way that Youngstown will not take your life is if you give it. That was amazing to me. because it ensured I could keep my commitment to myself. That if I say Youngstown will not take my life, then the answer is you must give it. Because no one will be able to say, regardless of what happens to me in this city, that they took my life, because you and I will stand witness to the fact that I've already said I give it. You cannot take something that I've given. I freely give it. And by giving my life to this city is what set me on a course for God's plans to prevail. Because I totally became water in that moment. I totally became someone who was flexible to hear from God and Him say to me, this isn't where I want you to be. And here I stand before you now as the city's next mayor. 52nd mayor of the city of Youngstown, and you have to understand that I could have taxed this city for what it took from my family. I could submit an invoice now that this city would never be able to pay. Until I came across a poem, and I'm not a poet, and I'm not someone who searches for poems, but this poem helped me stay like water. It helped me stay flexible. It helped me see my city. This poem said to me, even after all of these years, the sun has never looked at the earth and said, you owe me. Do you know what the sun does for this planet? Do you know the invoice that the sun could submit to the earth and say, you owe me quite a bit. I'm responsible for life. I'm responsible for making folks feel a certain kind of way. I'm responsible for vegetation growing. Without the sun, you don't have life. And this poem helped me understand that the sun has a major role to play with our planet, and yet it has never asked to be reimbursed for its efforts. The sun said, even after all of these years, I've never looked at the earth and said, you owe me. And I've never looked at this city and claiming the life of not only my brother, because you have to understand there's a domino effect. When my brother was murdered, that same mother began drinking herself to death. That same mother wound up in a nursing home at age 52. I want you to look around this room. I don't want to call anybody out, but if you're brave enough to raise your hand and say, I'm either close to or above 50 years old. I'm 45. Look around the room and imagine the people who have their hands raised being submitted and admitted to a nursing home, because that would have been my mother at 52 years old. My mother spent the next 18 years of her life deteriorating in a nursing home until she died at 70 years old. So even after all of this time, I have never looked at the city of Youngstown and said, you owe me. Even when my other brothers went to jail, can you imagine? Can you imagine the plans that I had? Can you imagine what it would take to disrupt those plans? Can you imagine being in a space where you have no clue who you are, your family, your city, and just loss after loss, and then find yourself in the space that I'm in now? There is no way to chart this kind of journey. There is no way to predict as a kid when I was sitting there drawing Saturday morning cartoons that I would be Youngstown's next mayor. And so what I leave you with is, when I'm having this conversation, I want you to take a look at the moment you're in right now. And I want you to ask yourself, are the plans that you have for your life, are they worth holding on to so much so that you miss out on the plans that God has for your life? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, those are the ones that will prevail. And I stand as evidence to the contrary. That means that everything everyone said about me, everything everybody thought about me, they have to now contend with what they see about me. That when they tell you you'll never be, that it's impossible, that I stand as a witness to the work that God has for not only my life, but yours. What I'm asking of you is the same thing God asked of me, is to say, don't be afraid of this city. Don't waste 10 years of your life hiding. Don't waste another 10 years of your life trying to figure it out and find yourself in a space where you had no clue that this is where you would be. I want you to take the moment, the same moment I took in the car before I got out and went into my job. Take that same moment and ask yourself if you are willing to give your life, to completely give it over to God so that he can give it to a city that needs each and every one of you. That's what I'm asking you to do. I want you to take a moment and ask if I'm so afraid that I want to hold on to my life, because the word tells us you're just going to lose it. That instead what we're asking you to do is to give. Give over your plans. I know that sounds crazy because your plans, they sound wonderful. If I sat with each of you and asked you, what do you have planned for your life? I would guarantee you'd have something wonderful to submit to me. And then I would still challenge you and say, do you think those plans are greater than the plans of the person who knows every single hair on your head, who knows every single challenge that you're going through right now, and who has way better plans for you than you could ever even imagine? And then I want you to have that conversation with yourself, and I want you to remember back to me. Remember me as evidence to the contrary. Whatever your brain's going to tell you that your plans are better, I want you to stand and look at your city's mayor and say that the plans I had for my life could never compare to the plans that God has, because they have brought me here in front of you to share those plans. The plans that turn the city of Youngstown completely upside down so it can stand as a city that is evidence to the contrary. Evidence that speaks against all of the people who try and hate on our city. That there is love here. That there are people here who have value and worth and significance. That even in our current condition, no different than God sent Jonah to Nineveh, in its condition, that this city, no matter what condition it's in, God still loves this city. And he uses people like me and uses people like you if you will choose to turn over your plans to him and give your life away to this city. So I thank you for the opportunity of being before you. I thank you for the opportunity to be this city's mayor. And I'm thankful for the plans that God has for my life, because those plans, not even I can mess up. You can't mess up God's plans, because in the end, they'll always prevail. So thank you all for this.